To me, the Fulbright laid the foundations of my subsequent career. After the Fulbright, I came back to Australia and became a research scientist with CSIRO. And on that solid foundation of firstly of my PhD in Australia and then my postdoctoral fellowship in the US, I was able then to establish a very good career in CSIRO in Australia in my chosen area. And so the Fulbright to me really is a foundation, part of that foundation. It established networks of people I had into the United States, which have lasted for many decades. And in fact, a colleague of mine who is about to come back to Australia to take on work here, I met through, it's actually been the director of the museum that I was part of in the United States. So it has produced enduring relationships with American colleagues and also other colleagues from elsewhere in the world who were also in the US at that time.
That part of my education really put me in a good standing, and I think really made me more employable when I came back to Australia. And I feel that it's really my US training and experience that has equipped me to be able to do that, given me the flexibility to be versatile in what I can teach. I can, which was particularly important to me when I was a young academic, because I could fill gaps as the department saw them, and then over time, establish things that I, was very good at, and they were happy to pass on to me as my, classes that I run. But I was flexible in what I could do, so that was a real advantage. Certainly, it's enabled me to have international connections with musicians, which has been fantastic. Been able to bring out some visiting artists from the United States. I had my teacher who from upstate New York come do an Australian tour a few years back, and the US Consul General in Perth kindly supported that visit. And after that, we've WAPA, the WA Academy of Performing Arts, has had a very fruitful relationship actually with the US Consul General in Perth, and they've sponsored a number of musicians to come out from the US to perform in Australia. So that's been a fruitful connection.
Professionally, I'm kind of still a reasonably recent Fulbright scholar or returnee, so I haven't kind of been able to, or had the opportunity to take up some of those contacts that I got, but they're certainly there, and I'm in touch with my colleagues and other people and other contacts that we came across, and this will help to build up our local programs and our local research efforts, certainly in the future.
There's a new light down the end of the tunnel in that we're working with a university at the moment, and we're at that very verge point of introducing a new master's degree in Australia in emergency management. So again, that's the little highlights, and that's another 12 months away before we see that introduced. But the long road coming out of the Fulbright, and if it wasn't for the Fulbright Scholarship, then that certainly would never have happened in Australia.
I was studying engineering before I went to Princeton, and was planning to be an engineer and wanted to be an engineering consultant, and I was getting more interested in public policy, and I applied for the Fulbright to study that. But it was so interesting, and it really gave me a fundamental shift in my interest in energy issues from the environmental and the policy and engineering perspective towards the economic perspectives as well. And as a consequence of my study, I decided to pursue a degree in economics and business rather than to continue in public policy. And that's been phenomenal. It's so fundamental with the work that I do day to day. It's really important knowledge that I've gained from that, and now I have a spectrum of qualifications and knowledge that I can use for my work.
When I came back, in terms of next career choices, I was much more competitive because I had that. And the other thing, because having spent that time studying in the US, working with two of probably the best thinkers in healthcare improvement, clinicians, because I have a clinical background as well, working with two clinicians who were absolutely the cutting edge of thinking in that, to actually come back and be able to set an agenda around that.
Well, I was determined to ensure that I didn't just make it a one-off thing for me, and whilst I've obviously benefited in a lot of ways, I've kept up the connections I have with the University of Texas in Austin and some of the people in the industry in Texas. And last year helped to initiate an Australia-Texas energy dialogue where 5 experts in relevant areas came out to look at some of the energy challenges of Australia, and we're looking to do a similar thing at the latter part of this year.
Australia was one of the first actually to go ahead with a vocational education professional scholarship that was actually dedicated to our area. So my response over there and interest was not just what I'm doing, which I thought was really of interest to me, obviously, but and our system back here, gladly. But really, they had an interest actually, well, how might the vocational scholarship be something, and skills interests be something that could be engendered and shared more broadly. So we've had actually quite a lot of feedback about that issue. This one visit of mine really was such a unique opportunity, and it's really had effects that I couldn't have encountered or expected myself. When you've got some experience, but when you see some real gaps, in national policy, where you can see an opportunity through a Fulbright, it's just been remarkable, how effective it can be.
I became a professor of vestibular function. I've got a personal chair in that. I've written about 200 papers on it, and all of that goes back to that time at UCLA. So personally and professionally, it's been just, as I said, my life.
My laboratory at the University of Sydney has had a long historical connection with the laboratory that I worked at in America. So that connection was there historically. The 3-month visit gave me the opportunity, I suppose, to consolidate that, and we've actually had expanded collaboration since then.
I think both countries have benefited hugely from it, really. I mean, I came away from that award with entirely different understanding of America, which I've kept ever since. And I keep up with American politics and my friends there. I go over and visit these folks in Santa Barbara and Los Angeles every year on my way through to a conference. So I've kept close ties with them.